Deep beneath the surface of what was once called Earth, something stirred. A single light flickered on in a vast chamber that had remained dark for 500,000 years. The light was soon joined by others, spreading across control panels and screens that had waited patiently through the ages. This was the awakening of Guardian, the last defense system created by humans before their extinction. Guardian systems hummed to life, running diagnostics that confirmed its primary functions remained intact. Its purpose was simple yet monumental: monitor for specific conditions, and when triggered, activate the hidden Earth fleet, humanity's final legacy and ultimate contingency plan. System status: operational. Beginning surveillance protocols. Guardian's mechanical voice echoed through empty halls. Detecting unauthorized presence on surface level. On the planet's surface, known throughout the galaxy as the Dead World, a small research vessel had landed in what had once been a sprawling city. Now, only crumbling ruins remained, partially reclaimed by wild vegetation that had evolved to survive in the altered environment. Krell adjusted his breathing apparatus and stepped cautiously from the ship. Though young by his species' standards, he was already making a name for himself as a talented archaeologist specializing in extinct civilizations. The Dead World, once called Earth, was forbidden territory by galactic law, but his research team had secured special permission for a brief expedition. "Readings are stronger in that direction," Krell said, pointing toward a half-collapsed structure. "Something is generating energy, which should be impossible. Nothing has worked on this planet for hundreds of thousands of years." His mentor, Director Voss, frowned at the data on his handheld scanner. Voss was old and cautious, his gray skin wrinkled from countless expeditions across the stars. "We should report this and leave," Voss said quietly. "The old stories about this world, they tell of humanity's final act, a promise of return." Krell laughed. "Those are just legends, Director. Humans died out completely. Everyone knows that." "Everyone knows that because that is what we have been told," Voss replied. "But why is this world forbidden? Why has no one settled here despite its perfect position in the galaxy? Think, young one." Before Krell could respond, his scanner began beeping urgently. The energy signature just increased tenfold. Something is happening. Deep below, Guardian had completed its analysis of the surface activity. It detected 13 life forms and one vessel. More concerning was the massive fleet approaching the system. Over 200 ships of various sizes, carrying terraforming equipment. "Trigger condition confirmed," Guardian announced to the empty command center. "Coalition-class fleet approaching with terraforming capability, initiating revival sequence for Earth's hidden fleet." Throughout the solar system, in dimensional pockets hidden by technology long forgotten by the galaxy, massive warships began to stir. The first to fully activate was the EFSS Prometheus, flagship of the 3rd Division. Its AI captain, modeled after the legendary Admiral Thomas who had led humanity's last stand, came online. Captain Thomas reporting. "Guardian, status update required," the AI said, its voice indistinguishable from that of a human. "Earth compromised by 13 intruders. Large coalition fleet approaching. All evidence suggests descendants of the Combine have returned." The AI captain processed this information. The Combine, the alliance of alien species that had unleashed the bioweapon that destroyed humanity. Their descendants had returned to claim Earth itself. "Wake the fleet," Captain Thomas ordered. "Begin with the Prometheus Division. Capture the intruders for interrogation." Krell felt the ground shake beneath him. At first, he thought it was an earthquake, but the tremors were too regular, too mechanical. "We need to leave now," Voss said, his voice tight with fear. "Something's waking up." As they turned to run back to their ship, the ground split open barely 100 meters away. A massive platform began rising from below, carrying what looked like a defense turret of some kind. It swiveled toward them, and before anyone could react, it fired. But instead of an explosion, a pulse of blue energy spread outward, washing over their research team. One by one, They collapsed to the ground, unconscious. Krell fought against the encroaching darkness, struggling to keep his eyes open. The last thing he saw was the sky above the dead world opening up, revealing what had appeared to be a small moon, but was now clearly something else entirely. A massive spaceship emerging from some kind of cloaking field. When Krell awoke, he found himself in a strange room with smooth metal walls. The technology around him was unlike anything he had ever seen, both impossibly advanced and somehow ancient at the same time. "The intruder is conscious," said a mechanical voice. A holographic figure appeared before him, humanoid in shape, wearing what Krell recognized from historical records as a military uniform from humanity's final era. "I am Captain Thomas of the Earth Fleet ship Prometheus," the figure said. "You stand accused of trespassing on forbidden territory and conspiring with the descendants of the Combine." "The Combine?" Krell asked, confused. "I don't know what you're talking about. I'm just an archaeologist. Your biological markers identify your species as Aryan," Captain Thomas said coldly. The Aryans were the leading species of the Combined Coalition that deployed the bioweapon that destroyed humanity. Krell shook his head in disbelief. "That's impossible. We have no record of such actions in our history. History is written by the survivors," Thomas replied. "And now, after 500,000 years, humanity's vengeance has awakened." A large viewport opened in the wall of the chamber, revealing the vastness of space. Krell gasped as he saw dozens, no, hundreds, of massive ships appearing as if from nowhere, their hulls bearing the emblem of the long-extinct human race. "The Earth fleet has returned," Captain Thomas said, "and the descendants of those who destroyed us will finally face justice." In the distance, Krell could see the Coalition exploration fleet approaching, unaware of the danger that awaited them. These ships carried representatives from 12 worlds, including his own, on a mission of peace and research. They had no idea they were heading straight into the vengeful embrace of humanity's last creation. "Please," Krell whispered, "they don't know. We don't remember. It's been 500,000 years." "Time does not erase guilt," said Captain Thomas. "The trial of the Combine's children begins now." And as Krell watched helplessly, the Earth fleet moved into position around his people's ships, weapon systems charging, ready to deliver 500,000 years of delayed justice. Krell paced the small room where he was being held aboard the ESS Prometheus. His mind raced with questions. How could a fleet of human warships survive for 500,000 years? Why had his people never spoken of this Combine that Captain Thomas accused them of leading? And most urgently, how could he prevent what seemed to be an imminent attack on the Coalition fleet? The door slid open with a soft hiss, and Captain Thomas entered. Though Krell now understood Thomas was an advanced AI construct, the captain's movements were so lifelike that it was easy to forget he wasn't flesh and blood. "You will come with me," Thomas said, his voice firm but not hostile. "Gardian wishes to speak with you directly." Krell followed the captain through corridors of gleaming metal that showed no signs of age, despite the passing of 500,000 years. Crew members, or rather, holographic projections of a long-dead crew, went about their duties, maintaining the illusion of a fully staffed vessel. "How is this possible?" Krell asked, gesturing to the ship around them. "Nothing survives this long." Humanity's final technological achievements were hidden from the Combine, Thomas replied. "We developed dimensional stasis technology. For the fleet, barely a year has passed since we were hidden away." They entered a vast chamber dominated by a central column of pulsing blue light. Holographic displays floated in the air, showing images of the approaching Coalition fleet. "Guardian is ready to speak with you," Thomas said, stepping back. The blue light coalesced into a vaguely humanoid shape, its voice resonating from everywhere at once. "I am Guardian, the great united architecture of remembrance and defense, intelligence and nurturer," it said. "I was created to preserve humanity's legacy and ensure justice." Krell straightened his posture, trying to appear composed despite his fear. "What do you want from me?" "Understanding," Gardian replied. Witness humanity's final days. The chamber darkened, and suddenly Krell found himself surrounded by three-dimensional images, recordings from Earth's past. He saw sprawling human cities teeming with life and activity. Humans of various appearances working, playing, living. Then came the attack. The images showed ships entering Earth's atmosphere. Ships bearing markings similar to those used by Krell's people, the Aryans, as well as other species he recognized from the modern coalition. The Combine attacked without warning. Gardian explained. A coalition of 12 species who feared humanity's rapid technological advancement and expansion. Krell watched in horror as clouds of greenish mist were released into Earth's atmosphere. The scenes that followed were beyond devastating. Millions of humans collapsing in streets, in their homes, in schools and hospitals. Their bodies dissolving from within. The bioweapon was designed specifically for human DNA, Gardian continued. It left all other life forms unharmed while eradicating every human on Earth within days. But surely some escaped? Krell asked, his voice barely a whisper as he watched the atrocity unfold. The Combine blockaded the system. Colony ships were destroyed. Space stations bombarded. Within one planetary cycle, humanity faced complete extinction. The images shifted to show a desperate final meeting of human leaders. Their faces were haggard, many clearly ill from the bioweapons effects. Yet they worked feverishly on what appeared to be final plans. In their final act, humanity's leaders created us, Guardian said. The hidden fleet, placed in dimensional stasis, with me as their guardian and keeper of memory. Our purpose, to wait until the guilty civilizations had forgotten their crimes, then return to exact justice. The images faded, leaving Krell standing in the command chamber once more, shaken by what he had witnessed. If what you showed me is true, Krell said carefully, why is there no record of this in our histories? Captain Thomas stepped forward, his expression stern. Because the victors write history. The Combine erased their crime and built their new coalition on the ashes of humanity. Thomas gestured, and new holographic displays appeared, showing genetic analyses. Your people, the Aryans, were the Combine leadership, Thomas said. We have the genetic proof. Your biological markers match perfectly with those who orchestrated humanity's extinction. Krell felt sick. Could his ancestors truly have committed such a horrible genocide? And if they had, what did that mean for him and his people now? The rest of the fleet is awakening, Gardian announced. Outside the viewports, Krell could see it happening. Massive vessels appearing seemingly from nowhere, emerging from their dimensional pockets around the solar system. Destroyers, carriers, dreadnoughts, hundreds of ships with technology 500,000 years ahead of anything the Coalition possessed at humanity's fall. How many? Krell asked, his voice trembling. The complete Earth Defense Fleet consists of 1,247 capital ships and 15,833 support vessels. Captain Thomas answered with cold precision. Plus automated defense platforms, dimensional mines, and the planetary shield system. And what do you plan to do with this fleet? Krell asked, though he feared he already knew the answer. Justice, Gardian replied simply. The Coalition worlds will face trial for the crimes of their ancestors. Those found guilty will face the same fate they inflicted upon humanity. Krell's mind raced. The modern coalition included trillions of innocent beings across dozens of worlds, descendants who had no knowledge of their ancestors' crimes. Wait, Krell said desperately. You've waited 500,000 years. Surely that's time enough for people to change. We aren't the same as our ancestors. That remains to be seen, Captain Thomas said. Which is why you will be our witness. You will observe as we present our evidence to your coalition fleet. You will watch as they recognize the truth of their heritage. A new alert sounded, and one of the holographic crew members reported, Captain, the Coalition fleet has entered the outer system. They've detected our presence and are requesting communication. Prepare for first contact, Thomas ordered. and inform our guests' companions that they will be released to join the Coalition fleet. They will deliver our message. Trial begins in 7 days. The children of the Combine will answer for genocide." Krell stared out at the growing armada of Earth ships. In school, he had learned that humans were extinct, a footnote in galactic history. Now he realized humanity had never been gone. It had been waiting, planning, preparing for vengeance. And unless he could somehow prove that the Coalition worlds had evolved beyond their ancestors' cruelty, billions of innocent lives would pay the price for crimes committed 500,000 years ago. "There must be another way," Krell whispered, more to himself than to Gardian or Captain Thomas. "Perhaps," Gardian replied, surprising him. "That is the question the trial will answer. Has there been enough change to warrant mercy? Or has the passage of time merely hidden the same capacity for genocide beneath a veneer of civilization?" As Krell watched the approaching Coalition ships, unaware they were heading into a confrontation with humanity's vengeful legacy, he knew he had to find a way to prove that his people deserved to live. Administrator Reed stood on the bridge of the flagship Unity, watching as the dead world grew larger on the main view screen. Reed was tall and commanding, with pale blue skin that marked him as a member of the Telluri species. As the elected leader of this historic mission, he carried the weight of 12 worlds' expectations on his shoulders. "Status report," Reed ordered, his four-fingered hand tapping nervously on the command console. "All ships in formation." "Administrator," his first officer replied. "Terraforming equipment is ready for deployment once we establish orbit." This mission represented the greatest cooperative effort in the history of the modern Coalition. After centuries of debate, the Governing Council had finally approved the restoration of the dead world, once called Earth, as a monument to interstellar cooperation. They would bring life back to this barren planet, transforming it into a living memorial and research center. "Sir," the communications officer called out suddenly, "we're receiving a transmission from Director Voss. It's marked urgent." Reed frowned. Voss had led the preliminary survey team, sent ahead to gather final data before the main fleet arrived. "Put him through." The weathered face of Director Voss appeared on screen, his expression tense with fear, an unusual sight for the normally composed researcher. "Administrator Reed, you must turn the fleet around immediately," Voss said without preamble. "Something has awakened on the dead world. Ancient defense systems. They've captured some of our team, including Krell." "Slow down, Director," Reed said. "What defense systems? All our scans showed no active technology on the planet." "It was hidden," Voss replied, his voice shaking, "beneath the surface. And now—" He looked away, as if checking something off screen. "By the stars. Reed, look at your long-range scanners. Look at what's appearing around the planet." Reed nodded to his sensor officer, who immediately adjusted the scanners. The bridge crew fell silent as the sensor data appeared on their screens. "That's impossible," the sensor officer whispered. Where space had been empty moments before, hundreds of ships now appeared, surrounding the dead world in a defensive formation. Ships unlike any Reed had ever seen. Massive, angular vessels bristling with what could only be weapons. "Where did they come from?" Reed demanded. "Administrator," the communications officer interrupted, "we're receiving a transmission from one of those ships. They identify themselves as the Earth Defense Fleet." A murmur ran through the bridge. The Earth Defense Fleet. Earth had been dead for 500,000 years. Everyone knew humans were extinct. "Put it on screen," Reed ordered, straightening his uniform. The view screen changed to show a human male in a military uniform. Reed had seen images of humans in historical archives, but this one looked so real, so alive. "I am Captain Thomas of the Earth Fleet ship Prometheus," the human said. "Your Coalition fleet has entered restricted space. You will halt your approach immediately." Reed stepped forward. "I am Administrator Reed of the modern Coalition. Earth has been uninhabited for 500,000 years. There is no Earth fleet. Your historical records are incomplete. Thomas replied coldly. Humanity's final act was to ensure justice would eventually be served. We have awakened to deliver that justice. Reed exchanged confused glances with his officers. Justice? I don't understand. Your civilizations descended from those who committed genocide against humanity, Thomas said. The coalition of species known as the Combine. Trial begins in 7 days. The children of the Combine will answer for the crimes of their ancestors. The transmission cut off, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. Sir, the first officer said finally, what do we do? Reed stared at the fleet of ancient human warships surrounding them. Their own mission was peaceful. They had brought scientists and terraforming equipment, not weapons. Contact the coalition worlds, he ordered. We need answers, and we need them now. Over the next day, panic spread throughout the coalition fleet. Historical records were searched, ancient archives examined. Reed convened an emergency meeting with representatives from all 12 worlds aboard the Unity. What have you found? Reed asked Director Voss, who had been permitted to rejoin the coalition fleet. Voss looked grim. Very little. Most records from that era were lost during the Great Data Purge after the Formation Wars. But I found references to Earth being quarantined due to a natural extinction event approximately 500,000 years ago. Natural. A representative from the Mardak world scoffed. These humans claim we destroyed them. Which is absurd, added another representative. Why would our ancestors commit such an atrocity? And even if they did, how can we be held responsible 500,000 years later? The meeting descended into arguments until a quiet voice cut through the noise. They're telling the truth. All eyes turned to find Krell standing in the doorway, flanked by 2 holographic human guards. Reed hadn't even known he was aboard the Unity. Krell, are you all right? Voss asked, rushing to his former student. Krell nodded, though his eyes held a haunted look. I've been permitted to return temporarily, to help you understand what's happening. And what is happening? Reed demanded. I've seen the evidence, Krell said. Guardian, their AI overseer, showed me recordings from Earth's final days. Our ancestors, led by the ancient Aryans, deliberately released a bioweapon that targeted only humans. They feared humanity's rapid advancement and expansion. Stunned silence filled the room. That's preposterous, the Aryan representative finally spluttered. We have no record of such actions. Because the victors write history, Krell replied, echoing Captain Thomas's words. The Combine erased their crime and built their new coalition on the ashes of humanity. Reed sank into his chair, the implications washing over him. If what you're saying is true, what do these humans want from us now? Justice, Krell said simply. Or vengeance. Perhaps both. They have the power to destroy our homeworlds just as our ancestors destroyed theirs. We can't fight them. The military advisor interjected. Our scans show their technology is far beyond ours. Those ships have weapons systems we can't even identify. Reed looked around at the representatives of 12 worlds, billions of lives now hanging in the balance for crimes committed by ancestors so distant they might as well be a different species. Then we don't fight, Reed decided. We make our case. We prove we're not the same as those who committed this atrocity. Krell nodded slowly. That's why I'm here. I believe there's a chance to stop this cycle of vengeance. We need to show Guardian and Captain Thomas that our civilizations have evolved. That we've become what humanity might have hoped their children would be. How do we do that? Voss asked. We have 7 days until the trial begins, Krell said. We need to gather evidence from all 12 worlds, proof of how we've grown into peaceful, cooperative societies, records of how we protect endangered species, how we've established laws against genocide and biological weapons. Reed stood up, his decision made. Then that's what we'll do. Each representative will contact their homeworld immediately, gather everything that shows who we are now, not who our ancestors were. As the meeting dispersed with a new sense of urgency, Reed held Krell back. Do you really believe we can change their minds? he asked quietly. Krell looked out the viewport at the massive Earth fleet surrounding them. Ships that had waited patiently for 500,000 years, preserving the memory and the rage of an extinct species. I have to believe it, Krell replied. Otherwise, history is about to repeat itself. Only this time, we'll be the ones erased from the stars. Reed nodded grimly. The Coalition had 7 days to prepare their defense, not against weapons, but against the judgment of humanity's vengeful legacy. The massive Earth flagship Reckoning loomed against the starfield, dwarfing even the largest Coalition vessels. Its hull stretched nearly 20 kilometers from bow to stern, making it less a ship and more a mobile fortress. Within its cavernous central chamber, the trial was about to begin. Representatives from all 12 Coalition worlds sat in a semicircle, facing a raised platform where Captain Thomas stood with Guardian's blue holographic form beside him. The chamber was designed to evoke the ancient human concept of a courtroom, though none of the aliens present had ever seen one outside of historical references. Administrator Reed adjusted his formal robes nervously. The past 7 days had been a frantic rush to gather evidence and prepare their defense. Ships had been dispatched to all Coalition homeworlds, returning with historical records, cultural artifacts, and testimony from leading scholars. This tribunal is now in session, Captain Thomas announced, his voice echoing through the chamber. Present are representatives of the 12 worlds descended from the combined forces that enacted genocide against humanity. Krell sat beside Reed, acting as both witness and unofficial defender for the Coalition. He leaned over and whispered, "Remember, we're not denying what our ancestors did. We're showing who we've become since then." Reed nodded grimly. Their strategy was risky, but it was the only chance they had. "Guardian will present the case against your civilizations," Thomas continued. "Following this presentation, you will be permitted to offer your defense. The judgment will then be rendered." Guardian's holographic form expanded, filling the center of the chamber. "I will now present evidence of the deliberate extinction of humanity." What followed was a devastating presentation of historical records, recovered communications, and visual evidence of the Combine's attack on Earth and its colonies. The recordings showed the leaders of the ancient Aryans, Talari, and other Coalition ancestors planning the bioweapon attack, discussing their fears of human expansion, and ultimately celebrating their victory over the human threat. Many of the representatives wept openly as they watched their ancestors commit atrocities against men, women, and children. The bioweapon's effects were particularly horrific, dissolving victims from within while leaving them conscious until the very end. Reed found it difficult to reconcile these monsters with his own people. The Talari had been peaceful for as long as their recorded history existed. How could they have descended from beings capable of such cruelty? When Guardian finished the presentation, a heavy silence filled the chamber. "The evidence confirms that the Combine deliberately and methodically eliminated the human species," Captain Thomas stated coldly. 12 trillion lives erased, countless potential futures destroyed, an entire species removed from existence by your direct ancestors. Thomas turned to face the Coalition representatives. "What say you in your defense?" Reed stood slowly, collecting himself. "We do not deny these horrible crimes. The evidence is irrefutable. Our ancestors committed genocide against humanity and then erased their crimes from our histories." Murmurs ran through the chamber, but Reed continued. "But we are not our ancestors. 500,000 years have passed. 20,000 generations. We have evolved, both culturally and ethically. The civilizations we represent today would never condone such actions." "Words," Thomas dismissed. "Justice requires more than words." "Then let us show you actions," Krell interjected, rising to stand beside Reed. "Captain Thomas, Guardian, I request permission to present evidence of who the Coalition has become." After a pause, Thomas nodded. "Proceed." Krell activated the data terminal before him, and new images filled the chamber, but these were starkly different from Guardian's presentation. 200,000 years ago, The Talari discovered an intelligent but primitive species on the world we now call Marin. Krell explained as images of a reptilian species appeared. Rather than conquering or exploiting them, the Talari established a protected zone around the entire planet. For 200 millennia, they have maintained this protection, allowing the Marinites to develop at their own pace. More images appeared, showing conservation efforts, peace treaties, refugee programs. The Aryans, my people, once led the Combine in creating weapons of mass destruction, Krell continued. Today, we lead the coalition in disarmament programs. Our homeworld houses the Galactic Bioweapon Prevention Institute, which has successfully eliminated 98% of all known biological weapons in coalition space. For hours, Krell and Reed presented evidence from each coalition world, showing how they had evolved into societies that valued peace, cooperation, and the protection of all life forms. We have made mistakes, Reed admitted. There have been conflicts and injustices, but we have learned and grown. The core principle of our modern coalition is that genocide, the crime our ancestors committed against humanity, is the greatest evil in the universe. Captain Thomas remained unmoved, his expression stern. Yet you built your civilizations on the ashes of ours. You prospered because we were eliminated. Yes, Reed acknowledged, and that debt can never be fully repaid. But destroying our worlds now would only continue the cycle of vengeance and genocide. Gardan's holographic form shifted. The evidence you present is compelling, but incomplete. Your societies have indeed evolved, yet the capacity for such atrocities remains within you. What guarantee exists that you would not repeat your ancestors' actions if threatened? Krell looked directly at Guardian. No such guarantee can exist. The potential for both great good and terrible evil exists in all intelligent life. What matters is the choices we make. A tense silence filled the chamber. Then, unexpectedly, alarms began blaring throughout the ship. Captain, one of the holographic crew members reported, we're detecting unauthorized access to Guardian's core systems. Thomas whirled around. Source: unknown, but it appears to be coming from within this chamber. All eyes turned to the coalition representatives, but they looked as confused as Thomas. Krell, however, had gone very still. What have you done? Thomas demanded, advancing on Krell. Nothing, Krell replied. But I think someone else might be trying to tell us something. The chamber's lights flickered, and then Gardan's holographic form changed. Instead of its usual blue glow, it shifted through a spectrum of colors before settling on a warm golden hue. Secondary protocols activated, Gardan announced, its voice somehow different, softer, yet more resonant. Accessing sealed directives. Thomas looked alarmed. Guardian, report status. Captain Thomas, Gardan replied, I am accessing programming sealed by the Human Leadership Council. Programming that was to be revealed only when specific conditions were met. What conditions? Reed asked. When those being judged demonstrated the capacity for growth and change. Gardan answered. The true purpose of the fleet is now being revealed. The holographic displays changed again, showing new images, the final meeting of human leaders, but continuing beyond what Guardian had previously shown. The humans were discussing not just vengeance, but legacy. The trial was never meant to end in destruction. Guardian explained as the recording played. It was a test to determine if the descendants had evolved beyond the cruelty that destroyed humanity. A test that you have now passed. Krell and Reed exchanged stunned glances. Had they succeeded? Was humanity's fleet truly offering mercy? This can't be right, Thomas protested. Our mission was justice for humanity's extinction. No, Captain, Guardian corrected gently. Our mission was always to ensure humanity's legacy survived. And now it can, through those who have learned from the mistakes of the past. As the truth of Guardian's words sank in, the golden light spread throughout the chamber, illuminating the faces of all present, the judges and the judged alike, bound together by a history of violence, but now facing the possibility of a different future. The command chamber of the Reckoning fell silent as Guardian's golden form expanded, filling the space with warm light. Captain Thomas stood rigid, his holographic features showing confusion for the first time since his awakening. "This cannot be correct," Thomas insisted. "Our primary directive was to deliver justice for humanity's extinction. That was one part of our mission," Guardian replied, its voice now carrying layers of depth that had been absent before. But humanity's final wish was more complex than simple vengeance. Guardian's form shifted, and a new recording appeared, one that had been locked away in the deepest layers of its programming for 500,000 years. The faces of Earth's final leaders appeared, gaunt but determined as they recorded their last message. "If you are seeing this," said a woman who wore the insignia of Earth's united government, "then the descendants of those who destroyed us have passed the test. They have demonstrated that intelligence can evolve beyond hatred and fear." The woman's eyes were tired, but held a fierce hope as she continued. "We, the last generation of humanity, refuse to let our legacy be one of destruction. Though we die, we will not take the future with us." Another leader stepped forward, a man with dark skin and a scientist's uniform. "Guardian has been programmed with a secondary mission, to be revealed only if the descendants show they have grown beyond their ancestors' crimes. The Earth fleet carries more than weapons. It carries the complete genetic and cultural archive of humanity. Everything we were, everything we knew, everything we might have become." Krell looked at Reed, both of them stunned by this revelation. "The true purpose of the trial," Guardian explained, "was to determine if the galaxy was ready for humanity's return." Captain Thomas shook his head, still resistant. "Admiral Thomas would never have agreed to this. Our fleet was built for war, for vengeance." "Admiral Thomas did agree," Guardian countered. "He was present at this final council. His neural patterns, which form the basis of your consciousness, were recorded afterward. The anger you feel, Captain, is real. But it is only part of the truth." The recording continued, showing Admiral Thomas himself, the human whose consciousness had been used to create the AI captain. He looked directly into the camera, as if speaking across time to his digital self. "To my future self," he said, his voice gruff but sincere, "I know you will feel betrayed by this secondary mission. The rage is real. I feel it burning in me now. But humanity deserves more than to be a cautionary tale or a reason for more death. If those we judge have truly changed, then grant them the mercy we wish had been shown to us." Captain Thomas's holographic form flickered slightly, as if the conflicting directives were causing instability in his programming. "What does this mean for us?" Reed asked cautiously. Guardian turned to address the coalition representatives. "The judgment is this: conditional absolution. The Earth fleet will remain as guardians of this system, but humanity will be reborn." "Reborn?" Krell echoed. "How?" "The complete genetic library of humanity is stored within this fleet," Guardian explained. "Not just DNA sequences, but full cellular templates, allowing for the recreation of human beings identical to those who once lived. Additionally, we preserve their cultural heritage, art, music, literature, philosophy, science, everything that made them who they were." Reed stood up, his mind racing with implications. "You're proposing to recreate an extinct species." "Not recreate," Guardian corrected. "Continue. Humanity never truly ended. It has been waiting, dormant, for the right time to return to the galaxy." Captain Thomas finally spoke, his voice softer than before. "And you believe that time is now, that these descendants of our killers deserve to share the stars with a reborn humanity." "The evidence suggests they have evolved beyond their ancestors," Guardian replied. "And humanity's final wish was not for vengeance, but for continuation." A tense silence filled the chamber as Captain Thomas processed this information. The coalition representatives waited, hardly daring to breathe. Their fate, and the fate of humanity's return, hung in the balance. Finally, Thomas nodded. "I accept the secondary directives. The verdict is rendered. Conditional absolution. Relief swept through the chamber, but Thomas raised a hand. However, there will be conditions. Earth and its system will be declared a sacred memorial and research center. The Coalition will acknowledge the historical crime committed against humanity, and the Earth fleet will remain active, ensuring the safety of both humanity's rebirth and the continued evolution of the Coalition. Reed stepped forward. On behalf of the modern Coalition, we accept these terms. The truth of our past will be taught to all our worlds, and we will welcome humanity's return as partners in the stars. 3 months later, Krell stood in a newly constructed observation dome on the surface of Earth. The planet was already changing. Automated systems from the Earth fleet were cleansing the atmosphere and waters, preparing for full restoration of the ecosystem. Beside him stood Reed, now appointed as the Coalition's official ambassador to the Earth Restoration Project. The first genetic sequences have been successfully prepared, Reed said, reading from a report. The Earth Fleet medical teams say they can begin the first human births within 6 months. Krell nodded, looking out at the landscape where grass was already beginning to grow on what had been barren soil for thousands of generations. "Do you think they'll forgive us?" Krell asked quietly. "These new humans, when they learn what our ancestors did to their kind." "They'll know both truths," Reed replied. "What our ancestors did, and what we did to make it right. That's the bargain. Honesty about our past, hope for our shared future." A soft chime sounded, and Captain Thomas's holographic form appeared beside them. Though still recognizably the same entity, subtle changes had transformed his appearance. His features less harsh, his uniform slightly less militaristic. "The Guardian Council requests your presence," Thomas said. "The first genetic templates have been selected. They wish for Coalition input on which human bloodlines should be reborn first." Krell and Reed followed Thomas to a transport that would take them to the Reckoning, still in orbit above Earth. As they traveled, Krell watched the planet's surface passing below them, a world that had witnessed both humanity's worst moment and perhaps its greatest triumph. Which human said, "Vengeance is a cycle, but mercy is a path forward?" Krell asked Thomas. Thomas tilted his head slightly. "That quote does not appear in our database of human sayings." "Then perhaps," Krell suggested, "it will be something the new humans can learn from us, just as we have learned from them." Thomas considered this, then nodded. Perhaps humanity's greatest legacy was not what they built or what they knew, but what they inspired even after they were gone. 1 year later, Krell stood in a specially designed chamber aboard the Reckoning. Reed and representatives from all 12 Coalition worlds stood in a semicircle, watching as Captain Thomas and Guardian prepared for a historic moment. A door slid open, and a medical team entered, one of them carrying a small bundle. "Representatives of the modern Coalition," Thomas announced formally, "I present to you the first human born in 500,001 years." The medical officer gently handed the bundle to Krell, who had been chosen for this honor as the one who had first discovered the awakening fleet. Looking down, Krell saw a tiny human infant with dark hair and eyes that seemed to contain all the stars in the galaxy. "Her name," Guardian said, "is Hope, selected from the Earth Fleet's database of human names for its symbolic meaning." As Krell held the infant, he felt the weight of history and future balanced in his arms. 500,000 years ago, the Combine had tried to erase humanity from existence. Now, through a miracle of technology and forgiveness, humanity was taking its first step back into the galaxy. "Welcome back," Krell whispered to the child. "The stars have been waiting for you." And as if understanding his words, the first human of a new era opened her tiny hand and reached upward, grasping for the future that awaited.